Hello, my name is Victoria, and I wanted to thank the organizing team for inviting me to speak today. I'm a policy researcher and social worker with a PhD and master's degree, and I'm here today to share some points of reflection from myself and other people with severe manifestations of long COVID. Thank you to Catherine and other individuals for giving me feedback for this presentation. Today I'm talking about clinical long COVID research and post-exertional malaise. For those new to the term, PIM is often defined as the prolonged worsening of symptoms following exertion, whether that exertion is physical or cognitive. And this is not just a form of exercise intolerance. It's a serious adverse reaction to exertion. It's very serious. PEM can be temporary, but it can also cause permanent worsening of someone's condition, and symptoms can include syncope, seizures, neurological disturbances, excruciating muscle weakness, etc. According to the research, PIM was found to be one of the most frequent symptoms following a COVID infection, with patients even reporting PIM 3 years post-acute infection. So why is this important? Well, if we know that many people with long COVID also experience PIM, it's very important that we take this into account when designing the research. And this should not be just an afterthought, but should be considered and planned for when designing trials from the start. One study shows that 67% of people with ME/CFS report crashes that never resolved. And this is very important information to know as we craft new clinical research. Here on the slide, I'm highlighting that people with severe PIM, meaning they rarely leave their homes or beds, are often fully excluded from trials. Further, some people with PIM who are not fully home or bed bound also have to expect PIM as an inevitable byproduct of participating in a clinical trial. Although access may be briefly acknowledged by researchers, it is not baked into the research design, and thus people with moderate PIM risk permanently worsening just to participate. Now, if people with long COVID and severe PIM are largely stuck in their homes or beds and excluded from trials, is the long COVID research as it stands representative of the full population of people with long COVID? And if not, who and what are we missing? Further, is it ethical to knowingly conduct trials that may cause long-term health consequences? I pause here to acknowledge that, of course, this is a difficult discussion to have, and many patients fear speaking up for fear of losing the ability to participate in a trial at all, and others fear that they cannot speak up about accessibility when there's so much political pressure and controversy around funding long COVID research in general. So patients are especially patients with severe PIM, are stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I know some researchers are trying their best to navigate this contentious landscape. I wanted to take us back to the Belmont report. If you have a PhD, you've heard of this before, but for those who may not know, in response to the violence of the Tuskegee experiments, the National Research Act of 1974 was passed, and the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research was created. And this report came from the Commission and efforts to set guidelines for research involving human subjects. One of the 3 ethical principles in the report is beneficence. And under this principle, it states that persons are treated in an ethical manner, not only by respecting their decisions and protecting them from harm, but also by making efforts to secure their well-being. Beneficence is understood in a stronger sense as an obligation. Additionally, it states that investigators are obliged to give forethought to the reduction of risk that might occur from research or investigation. I bring up this point to say that it is not just MDs who are responsible for upholding just and equitable care for their patients, but also researchers who are obligated to ethically navigate the risk and benefits of all research involving human participants. This is not to say that trials should not be happening, but that we may need to become creative about the ways we engage in them, as we're dealing with a population of people incredibly ill and vulnerable to worsening without proper care. And yes, of course, this does not occur in a vacuum. It's important for us to remember that researchers have to contend with planning for confounding variables and the validity of findings. However, we also have to weigh the well-being of patients, which is what beneficence is pointing to. I've been on calls before where researchers were saying they cannot provide certain accessibility measures due to potentially muddying the data. However, we need to back these claims with science. To what extent will providing access impact the validity of findings? Is that reduction in validity, potential or proven, worth potentially disabling a participant by causing repeated or prolonged PEM? These are the questions I am hoping researchers sit with. Here are some ways that patients have expressed that we can reduce PEM in trials. Reducing exertion by including a more capacious framework for time allotment while acknowledging trial urgency. Here, this is speaking to the need to understand that people with PEM need more than 1 or 2 days for testing. Making patients choose between 5 and 6 hour days or 2 days of 3 to 4 hours may not actually be ethical when we're speaking about people with moderate PEM. That is because even an hour of testing can cause a severe episode. So we really need to go back to the drawing board with this one. Several hours back to back can cause ramifications. Use of mobile phlebotomy and at-home test and requiring PPE at testing sites and proper ventilation. I'm shocked that this has to be said, but giving someone COVID at a long COVID trial is really, really atrocious, guys. Providing lists of community resources upon visit, multiple versions of consent, including plain language, written and spoken, prior to visit, and compensation for least exertional transport to site, whether that's train, rideshare, gurney, or wheelchair. I hope these questions and points raise some discussions about making trials more ethical, and thank you for your time.